One of the crimes that Socrates was convicted of by his fellow Athenians was atheism. So let's talk about the Super Bowl here. If we read in the Summa of St. Thomas, when we get to his treatment of the virtue of religion, he offers two traditional etymologies of this word religio. One of them is comes from the Latin re legit, which means to read again, and the second one comes from religare, which means to bind together. The way Thomas Aquinas explains this is that religion always uh, joins us to that which is highest. And well, if you've been to every you've been to any religious ceremony, especially if you've been more than once, you'll notice they go uh, every so often over the same things over and over again. They're reading the same things over and over again. And as far as I can tell, that's something that's common to any kind of practice that binds people together. They go over the story over and over and over again. They do this in order to, well, a great many reasons, but we could say at least it reminds the people who are gathered together of why they are there. Oh, this is how we came together. This is how we are all joined together. Uh, and so, what happens every year at Christmas is we get together and we read the stories of Christmas from the Bible over and over again. We read those stories again. Now, do you, after a certain number of times, know the stories? Well, yes, but together we read it again in order to be reminded. And in the Super Bowl festivities, uh, what do they do? What do they really focus on? Well, they really do focus on the stories of the two teams that are there. Right? We don't just have people talking strategies. We don't just have people talking about the different players, the different prospects. When you watch especially the pregame, they're going over the whole season, and then very often they're linking, the 49ers back to the glory days in the '80s, and they're telling this story and that story. It's all very story based. And so, since the Super Bowl is not merely a contest of skill, but also told in this story-like manner, and they go over these stories over and over again, you can see that as being one of its religious dimensions. The second one is religare, right, to bind things together. Uh, so the first thing that Thomas Aquinas says the virtue of religion does is it binds us to God, right? He locates the virtue of religion underneath the heading of justice. Religion is that with virtue by which we render to God what he is owed in justice. It's what we give to him because he deserves to have it. And so we are bound to him. Praise the Lord. He has bound himself to us as well. Great blessing that we could have never asked for or anticipated. Uh, and then, when we've bound ourselves to the Lord and we are rendering him these things in justice, it's not something that we do only alone, but it is something that we do together. Right? I can't think of any 100% private religion. Now, maybe somebody's gone out there and invented it, but guess what? They haven't told anybody. So, how would I know about it? All of the great religions, all of the ones that have sticking power and are able to actually do things in the world, they have all been communal. They've all been public things, something that binds people not only to the highest, but also to each other in their common rendering of praise and worship to the highest. The Super Bowl is not something that you do on your own. How many people have ever sat and watched the Super Bowl by themselves? Uh, some have. But I'd say that the most common way to do so is to watch it in a group. It's always considered some kind of a group activity, and people are kind of binding themselves to watch this football game, regardless, oftentimes, of how they feel about football. Uh, Very interesting thing that people might feel obligated to sit through this game, even if they don't feel like they're particular football fans. Hmm. So, my fellow impious folks, maybe some of you are Canadian or European and are not committing any kind of atheism and not watching the Super Bowl, but I was not invited over to anybody's house. And I would have said yes. I would have abandoned this and gone and watched the Super Bowl if anybody had invited me. But well, none of my friends are really all that into it. So here I am with a few of you, and we are sitting here in our impiety, our lack of American piety here. So that's all I've got for you today. Even if you watch it alone, it doesn't happen with just you. It is something bigger than you. Uh, Super Bowl is one of the only things left in American culture that people traditionally do together. Yes, and look at us. Look at us. We are not doing that right now. It's a replacement for sure, but from the recession of the church, not for any other reason. The church makes excuses for not being attractive enough. Okay, thank you. Samuel Ewing is actually S. Been wondering who S is this entire time. We figured it out. Maybe all of you are actually at Super Bowl parties right now and only have this on the side. And that's why you can't join on and save me from all my rambling. I knew somebody would save me from my rambling. You ramble instead. You're better at it.
Oh, wow. Thanks, I think. I don't know.
Remember your early live streams? You didn't really have much of a plan, and you just kind of went for it for like an hour.
True.
It was
An
kind of,
hour
it was a little impressive and also somewhat frightening,
an
which they
hour
could,
40, whatever.
which we could put on your gravestone when that day comes.
I know, really. It's like, "Yeah, thanks." Right. It's like, "He was known for rambling."
No, no,
Yay.
no, impressive, but also kind of frightening. That's what I was thinking.
Impressive but frightening. I'll take that. That would be fine. That'd be perfectly fine. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, how, that I think sports has that pattern of religion in it. Right, because I think that's really what it is, right? It's very much that playing out of that pattern of getting together, liturgy, interacting with things outside yourself.
He's not going to an official, he's not going to do home football, right? All by
Right.
himself. You need to have another congregation on there for it.
Why would you? Yeah. Plus, it's a terrible game. Just horrible lineup. Taylor Swift is there. It's just the whole thing's ruined. They've
It's
got
like
a they've got an
is that is like Taylor Swift like a black hole where, like the gravitational attention just gets in there and doesn't come out?
That's part of it. That's part of it. Sarah sold her Chiefs game tickets to the Patriots for an ungodly amount of money because Taylor Swift was there. So,
Mm,
so yeah, pretty much. And she
mm.
had great seats because you turn around, her box was right there. So, yeah, it was it's sort of interesting, right? Because there's a cultural lightning rod icon in Taylor Swift who was more or less wholesome and now is not. And you actually know where that line is, or at least I do. Because
Where is the line? 2017?
I don't know the date. There was an album that she put out, and just while she was producing that up, this is one of those weird things. Like, why would I even know this? Because like I barely pay attention to these things, but it just turns out that I saw like some kind of documentary on Taylor Swift, and the time period that it covered was this particular album. And just before this album comes out, she's like all upset about I think it's Marsha Blackburn or something in Tennessee election, and so her producer, I think her father's a producer or something. But anyway, the people advising her in the room are like, don't get involved in politics. Don't say a word. Don't go there. Right. And then she does. And her album, look, she's a pop star. So flops is a relative term, but her album flops. Like, it's just terrible. Her previous album was like 3 times more successful by any measure. And so that was kind of the beginning, the end. And then the next album, I guess, is a little bit better. And so it's like, all right, you're kind of, you didn't weigh in on politics. You didn't mention woke stuff in your lyrics. All is well with the world, sort of thing, roughly speaking, right? But now all that's over again because she's back on this, right? And so the meme train on, sings, and it has, this meme came back, right? Sings songs about her bad choices in men, endorses Joe Biden memes, all over the place again. I thought we were over this, but apparently not. And so who knows where that ends? But there's that lightning rod effect for sure. But also there's all sorts of weird stuff apparently going on. Like, now there's multiple national anthems being sung at the football game. And I didn't know that was a thing, because that can't possibly ever be a thing. But they're going to try to make it a thing. And so it doesn't have a telos, though. So, yeah. So there's that going on, right? But the corruption is kind of everywhere. And she's sort of also a symbol of that wholesomeness into corruption, for sure. Hey, Trey. Good to see you, man.
Howdy. I mean, I disagree with that. Pretty big.
With what?
Well, that Taylor Swift is not political, or at least that the time she's been less political, it's been to like her benefit, and I disagree. I think that do you know like why she has Taylor's version?
What's that?
So basically, when she recorded all of her big albums, it was under somebody named Scooter Braun, right? And he has access to all the masters. And basically, he was kind of a trash guy, bad deal and everything like that. And like pretty misogynistic and all that stuff. And so in spite of that, Taylor Swift said, I don't want you having access to my masters. So I'm just going to redo the albums and release it again just as Taylor's version. So she's just been redoing the same albums again and again. And they've been more popular than the previous times. And technically they're more political because like she's making these albums as a statement against like a misogynistic man. So yeah. And I also think it's interesting.
That's not a political issue, Trey, but okay.
You don't think? What about
misogyny has nothing to do with politics? Like, I don't.
What do you mean?
It's nothing to do with voting. Politics is voting. Like, politics really isn't anything other than voting. But like, misogyny is independent of politics. You can have misogyny in any political system under any political formulation. Like, you can't link those two things.
You've got some extremely misogynistic feminists out there. I mean, come on.
Wait.
Like,
what do you think about? Wait, I'm a little confused by that because what do you think about like Trump's comments on the bus? You don't think that was political in nature, or like that involved politics, or that was used in a political realm? To grab him by the.
Okay, that didn't happen when he was running for office. It was 10 years before.
That misogyny was used as a political tool.
Everything's being used as a political tool. That doesn't mean everything's political. Those are two different things. It's common confusion, right? The fact that I can say X is political doesn't make it political.
Because by that token, Joe Biden's Catholicism is also political, and it's like, well, it really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, Catholicism. Catholicism is not political. Your religious affiliation is not political by definition, but it's being used that way. I agree. It's trying to be used that way, but those are different things, dude. Just because someone's trying to do something doesn't mean it's real. It just means they're trying to do something. You can't link things in time like that, right? Like you can't say, oh, well, you see, I thought of a new way to prosecute World War I, and therefore they had access to that back then, and therefore the war should have been over 2 years earlier. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
So you also
got your story right, Mark. Taylor Swift was kind of wholesome. The Taylor Swift that I remember in high school. And then she gets political and everything gets weird.
yeah.
So it's almost like this politics stuff needs to have like specialty hazardous gloves when you're handling it.
Oh,
Because
it's a flattening of the world. It's a low resolution picture, to use Peterson language, because we're
so
in the
do you
Peterson
see
here.
politics and governance as being the same thing or related?
No, they're not related. Politics is voting. Politics is binary voting. Really, all it is. Like, I mean,
Right. So the work of governance is actually quite a bit more complicated than the politics.
way more complicated. Well, and you see this, right? Because people go, well, it's political and it's about these parties, blah, 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 blah. And then when that doesn't work, because that doesn't work to describe anything that's going on or anything that has gone on, right? When that doesn't work, they go, it's the shadow government, which is really just a bureaucracy, by the way. It's like, all right, well, if all the complications in the bureaucracy, and that's not political because they're not elected, what are we talking about? And it just turns out that no, you used a bad frame. Now you have a bunch of things you can't explain. And so you keep adding things. Like, this is a good tell. If you want to know if someone has a bad frame, if every time their frame doesn't work or their prediction is bad, they add an exception to their frame and say, well, that would have worked except for the hydroquadrodynamic equation needed to carry the what. Right away their frame is bad. Like, no, your frame is bad, dude. It's just a bad way to think about the world.
Okay, I actually really like having a difference between politics, which is politicians out there selling a vision, which is maybe occasionally dirty and necessary, but very prone to corruption.
But politics is how you get elected. But most of the government operations have nothing to do with elected officials. Nothing.
Right,
because
which
most
is
of
why
the government doesn't consist of elected officials.
Understood. My dad was a government employee for like 30 years, so I get it. I get it.
Never been elected.
Never been elected to anything.
Right, and therefore, even though you can always, and people do this, right? They lump everything into politics. So, well, there's office politics. It's like, are you talking about what happens when more than one person is in a room? Right? Because then, okay, so any group activity is politics. That isn't helpful.
Well, I mean, it does come from the word polis, which meant city-state or community or something like that.
Right, but see, and this is where we get confused. But this is where everybody gets confused with language. Language is not flat, right? Language is specific to the layer of analysis. I think that's how Peterson would say it, right? And so you can't say the polis and the family are the same, because the polis is more than one family by definition. And so you also can't do it with the office. You can't say the office and the polis. They're different scales. There's different dynamics.
Unless you have a corporation that runs government.
Well, that's only happened a couple times, and it doesn't happen now. Like, everybody bitches about it now. I'm like, oh, let me learn you some history, my friend. You will be grateful that we do not have these problems. They were much worse than the freaking so-called robber barons, who are neither robbers nor barons. They actually got Teddy Roosevelt the vice president. Like, they for real bought that election. Like, actually bought it. Like, that hasn't happened since. We should all be grateful, by the way. Nothing like that has happened since.
Teddy Roosevelt vice presidency. So that would have been when who was the president that he ran with?
Who got shot, making him president? That's the better question.
Remind me, I know this, but it's gone.
Lyndon B. Johnson.
All of your history is gone.
It's all gone. Haven't you ever had this happen before, Mark? I'm mere flesh. I'm not an angel from the realms of light like you. So.
But JFK was expected to die as well because he had long-term illness as well.
We all die, dude. I hate to break it to you. I expect everybody to die, except me, because no evidence. But that's just the way I roll.
William McKinley. See, thank Don's being helpful here. William McKinley. That was all I was asking about. And then
But the irony is that they give Roosevelt the vice presidency specifically to prevent him from becoming president, to prevent him from doing what he eventually does when he becomes president, which is just hysterically funny. So corporate attempt, and like this is, it's not a backroom conspiracy, right? Like literally everybody knows what's going on. The 3 or 4 wealthiest men in the world at the time, right? Way wealthier than anybody alive today, by the way. Any one of them is way wealthier than anybody alive today. They actually just freaking buy the election, like flat out, like, nah, this is how this is going to go. We're going to dump all our money into it. And they did it very above board because they're all religious men. That's the other thing that everybody misses. These wealthy people are all super religious. Like John Rockefeller tithes from the beginning, from when he was poor to when he was wealthy. He tithes to the church 10%. I think nobody realizes this. And so they actually just throw the money into marketing for real. This is before marketing was a term, but they throw the money into advertising for election. And so, these things happen, right? But they don't work. Like even that fails because there's an assassination, and then
they've got trust-busting Teddy Roosevelt in the presidency.
Right. And then Teddy Roosevelt enacts exactly what he wants. He breaks up Standard Oil. And Rockefeller gets more wealthy. It has the exact opposite effect. Every time people try to do something, it fails. It's hysterical. And everyone's like, I know, we're going to do X. And I'm like, oh, is that how that works? Yeah. Have you read a history book? You should get one about anything. Just one.
So Standard Oil gets broken up into smaller companies, and Rockefeller still has stake in all of them, and that's how he gets more wealthy, or he just starts investing his money elsewhere, or
the way wealth works is some portion, there's a difference between cash flow wealth and income, right? And so the way wealth works is most of your wealth is locked up in an asset.
Right.
As long as you don't move that asset, you can't realize that wealth.
Right.
That's why you can't have Jeff Bezos, come up with $200 billion or whatever the hell he's worth overnight, because somebody has to give him that money for the wealth. Like wealth is not money, right? And so it's potential money. And so until the wealth moves, there's no money, right? But when wealth moves, typically the value of wealth either goes way up or way down. Like it never, in other words, the valuation of wealth being static is never properly representative. It's always either high or low.
And the reason this would be is if Jeff Bezos started selling a whole ton of Amazon stock, either Amazon stock would go up because people see a great opportunity, or Amazon stock would go down because all of a sudden there's a lot more of it available.
Gross oversimplification. There's lots of reasons, but yes, that is one way to look at it. That is valid, but it's a super flat way to look at it. But valid. Like, yeah, you can say, and this has happened many times in the stock market. This happens all the time in the stock market, actually, right? Like somebody goes, well, I'm going to divest my shares. That means I lose my seat on the board, right? And then they're like, ooh, finally, like this is happening with Disney, right? Disney shares would go up tomorrow if certain people weren't in charge of the company. And Elon Musk is very much trying to make that happen, right? Mm-hmm. Because he knows that under the current regime, Disney's stock is in the toilet. And all you have to do is change the management and it will go up. Now, another person that does this all the time is Warren Buffett, right? When Warren Buffett buys any number of shares in any kind of a company, typically what they're doing too is they're coming with consulting agreements and stuff like that. And so the shares are nothing. They're getting direct income, right, from management consulting sorts of deals, things like that, that the shares go up immediately because the wealth is moving, right? And then when the wealth moves that Rockefeller has in Standard Oil, it just so happens that it was all undervalued because no one knows how to value things, and value static. And things are not static, right, at the end of the day. And
it's a genuinely hard problem.
Well, this is the thing. Like the real problem in the world is that you, me, and everybody else has been told that they can understand these things. And the simple fact of the matter is No, you absolutely cannot. Like, no, you can't. You just can't. And then you've been told that about a bunch of things, none of which individually could you understand. None of them. Right. And then you prefer these simple models like, oh, well, everything's political. Doesn't make any sense at all, as we've proven earlier. Right. And then, it's just about economics. Nobody even understands economics, but even if they did, economics doesn't explain anything, actually, right? And then, it's sports. I know how sports works. And then I know how valuations work in the stock market. You don't understand any of that stuff.
I still disagree.
I don't understand any of it.
That's my
right.
Because how would you deal with like things that don't involve voting but are political? Like revolutions would not be political under your definition because you're not voting for it. You're taking actions in the street.
Yeah, revolutions aren't political.
Bullets.
Revolutions aren't political.
No, they're not political. They're not even done for political means.
Then what would you categorize it as?
Yeah, you can say X is political, but it's not, right? Only really voting is political.
But that seems like an error in your definition. You're saying revolutions are not political.
They're not political.
Well, then what would they be?
They're revolutions. I mean, what it is, one thing, if the revolutionaries get what they want, it's a movement from order into chaos.
Yeah.
So the fact that it can't be like really nicely classified is kind of a feature and not a bug, right? It like, oh, we're moving out of, the realm of the crown running the. Okay, that was a rebellion.
No, we're moving away from the king. We're moving away from king rulership, right? All the revolutions have been moving away from king rulership so far. All of them. Every single revolution we've had has been moving away from king rulership.
And so because it's either a time of flux or just a time of destruction, because sometimes you get both of those, the fact that you can't really like categorize it well, like we can't just say it's, this is just political, like that's just kind of what it is.
No, but I think going further, because I want to say revolutions, but then you would also have to say that like Malcolm X was not political in his actions. BLM is not political. Like I feel like
they're not. That's not hard. I can say that. I just did. Problem solved.
So, like a dictatorship doesn't involve politics then.
No, I don't think dictatorships are political. There's no voting. The thing that people talk about with politics is an appearance that is designed to get or manipulate power. That's all they're describing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, guess what? Guess what doesn't have that feature? Anything that doesn't involve voting. Right? Because a king doesn't need the same sort of, like, kings only need one appearance, the regal appearance, roughly speaking, if you want to compress it, right? That's all they need, right? They just need the appearance of regality, which would include things like confidence. It would include things like the idea of leadership, right? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't need or have any of that, right? Okay, well, she's also not trying to be a king or a queen, although maybe she kind of is. Different discussion, right? And so she's a political animal where a king would not be a political animal because a king follows a very clear pattern.
No, wait, I'm confused because you mentioned it's about power. And as you said, things aren't innately static. And it seems like you're giving a static definition of only voting, but power fluctuates, right? There's times that the king can be.
What do you think power is, Trey? First, you got to define power for me, buddy. Because
I would say influence on the world and other people.
Power is not influence. Influence is influence. Try again.
Why would you disagree with that definition?
Because all you said was influence. Like you didn't say anything other than influence. I agree that influence exists, but it's also inevitable. So everybody has influence.
No, but I'm saying to a certain object. And I'm saying to like.
Oh, okay. Everybody has influence to a certain object. Now what? Like they do. Like I do, you do, everybody does.
There's levels.
Okay.
Right.
Well, how is a universal definition helpful? Everybody has power. I actually agree with that, although my definition is nothing to do with yours. But go on. Just explain it to me. It's fine. I'm just trying to figure out what you're talking about, dude. It's not an attack, right? It's just like, what are you talking about?
No, but I'm trying to break it down. Well, I guess why
Are you
would
sure
something...
you know? Here, Trey. Here, let me help you out, buddy.
Yes.
Almost nobody who uses that word ever has a definition for it. Ever. I've never met a person that could define power adequately outside of a handful of people whose definitions I fundamentally disagree with on some level, right? Like, people do not know what they're talking about when they use the word power. I'm not saying they're not referring to something specific and important. I'm saying they don't know how to define it, which is a different statement. Okay.
Energy over an object. Energy over an object. Energy over something material. Meaning, like, I mean, if you have power, like, we can use it in the, like, I mean, we call electricity power because it has a substance which can possess another thing. It can manually possess that thing. Like, when I get shocked by electricity, I get possessed by it.
So Josh,
yeah.
How about this? How about it has to be focused energy?
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was saying. Like, it is conducted, like, electricity is conducted through a wire, which, comes into me, and
when it's conducted through, right. See, here's the problem with a word like power. You are correct. You get hit by random electricity from however that happens. It could be lightning, it could be static, it could be you stick your fingers in a light socket. Random things are going to happen.
Yep.
You can still cast that as power. I'm not even going to disagree with that. I don't think it's helpful, right? I think that if power is not focused, it's not really power. Because if it doesn't have an element of control, right, then it's useless. Right? Because all you're saying now is when you move in the world, things happen randomly. No kidding. I agree. That is true.
Like, I take steps across the desert. I make, imprints on the sand, whatever. Like, we all influence. We can't make a move without influencing the game.
You affect the habitat. You change the temperature of the sand, right? You kill a bunch of creatures you can't even see because they're under. Like, who knows what happens? All kinds of things could be happening. And so, I agree that there's a power in walking across the sand, but nobody would cast it that way effectively, because when they're talking about power, they're talking about somebody wielding something to a specific effect. And so that's why I add in focus. Like, you got to have focus.
Yeah. Let's take the game of chess. So it's the most powerful piece, the queen. Why? Because she can move in a 360 direction, and she can capture, she can kill, she has the most mobility to kill, like the most mobility to possess, most mobility to capture and position. Like, there's all, and it's focused inside the game, like you said. Yeah. No, I get you.
No, I disagree.
Then the queen's not powerful if you don't use her correctly.
Exactly. Like,
so
she can be wasted.
Focus. You need the focus. Without the focus, the queen's power is null. It's zero.
Yeah. Well, Trey, why do you disagree?
Well, I think that,
sorry,
I would say the Joker is somebody who is powerful, at least in, the mythos, right? But he isn't really directing it anywhere. It's very much chaotic. It's unpredictable, and that's sort of what...
He's just directing it towards destruction.
Yeah, he's a supportive character. He's a mirror. The Joker is a mirror. Like, he's supposed to show the court how ridiculous they can look. Like, how silly your game of royalty is. Like, look at me. Like, he mimes.
Are you talking about Batman or Jesters?
Which Joker?
Both, honestly. Because Joker in the Batman was showing society what they really are. That's why he, like, if you look at the Dark Knight, when he play, and Jonathan Pageau did a video about this, when he puts he makes the criminals the nurses and the doctors, and then he makes the victims the criminals. He reverses it so that the policemen end up trying to attack the criminals, or try to attack the victim. Sorry.
Right.
And that, sorry.
The Joker is ineffective, right? And that's the thing. Like, a Joker is not taken seriously. Why? Because the Joker doesn't wield power.
He just reflects. He just reflects. He's mirroring you. You're in a mirror.
But
in
it's
a
not
mirror,
taken
your
seriously.
image is reversed.
You laugh at the Joker. You laugh at
Yeah.
jokers. Why? Because you can't take them seriously. Why? Because they're of no, they can't harm you. Why? Because they're not directing anything.
No, but
Well, you have to know. Take a stand-up comedian. What makes them funny is that they point out points of civilization and society that are ridiculous, and they show it to you how ridiculous it is, and it makes us laugh.
I don't. Usually
No,
they just
seriously.
swap. Usually they just swap perspectives. Like Bill Cosby's
Yeah,
early
okay,
work.
I'll agree.
Like,
I'll agree with that.
right? He goes like this. He goes, when I was a child, I did X, right? But
Yeah.
but he talks about it as though he's an adult, even though he's like 4 years old or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's extremely funny because everyone knows a child's not an adult, and that's his funniest. Like Bill Cosby's, it's stuff from like the 60s. Oh my goodness, like that stuff is like, it's totally next level comedy stuff, right? But that's what he does primarily. Joe Rogan does the same thing, right? You take two perspectives and you either swap them or you swap the characters in them, and then that creates an absurdity, and that's a good way to,
that's
like, if you were autistic and you wanted to be funny, that's what you would do as a procedure to make it happen, and it works.
The formula for humor is that it's a swapping, it's a flip, it's the upside. Jonathan describes it as like the upside down world, like like he gives you a glimpse into the upside down world. And then you're like, oh, my world is ridiculous. And then you're like, oh, that's funny. Like, because, I agree with you. I see that. But I'm thinking you still disagree, Trey. What's up?
Well, I feel that if we gave descriptions of the people who he's changing, like the Joker, I would say the Joker is exerting power on Two-Face, right? Like on Harvey Dent, and changing him to something else. And I would say the people who operate outside of the system and have more chaotic power have the most power because they're changing the rules and everything like that, and they're changing.
But it doesn't work, Trey. This is the point. It never works, ever.
It does.
Ever. Look at the French Revolution. That's exactly what they did. They said, all right, we're going to get rid of the king. Okay, we're going to get rid of the king. And now what happens? Everybody dies. And everybody dies until the people who started the revolution get killed by the guillotine. The thing that they started in action.
What happened to the people?
Which people? They all died. Everybody dies.
But then they also became okay with that system. They became okay with
They didn't. They
still
got
royalists in
Napoleon,
France,
dude.
Trey.
They literally got Napoleon. They got a different king. That's what happened. They got a different king. The end of the French Revolution is Napoleon declaring himself emperor.
Yep.
Are you saying that they were not socialized into sort of being okay with seeing people's heads chopped off? Because that's what I'm saying.
No, they weren't. That's why the killing machine stopped. It's just the killing machine couldn't stop until two things happened. One, the fomenters of the revolution got eaten by the thing they started, right? It's parasitic in nature. A revolution is a parasitic thing. That's why anarchists are always the ones they trot out. What happens in a revolution is the intellectual class gets pissed off. And sometimes the nobility. In the French Revolution is nobility. Robespierre is noble. That's the thing. He's not a commoner. He's not even merchant class. He's in the noble class, right? So he gets pissed off, basically. He feels like he's been snubbed by the king. The king had a cold. But whatever. It's a stupid story. The whole thing is dumb, right? It's another one of these dumb things. It's just dumb things happen. So Robespierre basically organizes this whole thing. And then nobody, just like in the revolution before, I've got videos on this on Navigating Patterns, Trey, by the way, just saying. Right? Just like the English Revolution, right? Nobody wants to take responsibility. Nobody. Parliament will not vote. I think it's called Parliament, whatever. The French government will not vote on anything after they exile the king. They will not. They're like, no, bro, we don't want to like be in charge. And so the killing machine's going and going and going, right? The random nobles, and it's random. Random nobles are losing their heads. People like the Marquis de Sade, who's obviously not a good guy, in case anybody's curious about that. Still a no on Marquis de Sade. He's not a cool dude. He's actually in charge of some of the lists. And he's like, well, here's my woman of the week's parents. We're going to spare them, even though by all the rules that, quote, rules, revolutions don't follow rules. we're gonna. But who's running the guillotines? It's not the people who started the revolution. It's the anarchists, because the anarchists always kill people. That's what anarchists do. They bomb people, they shoot people, whatever. They're just hatred and resentment driven. Same with the English Revolution. Same with the Russian Revolution. Right? The only revolution doesn't seem to follow that pattern is ours in the U.S. By the way, different problem. So they're always trotted out, right? They're always being used, and they're always usurped. And you see this with the Bolsheviks, right? The Bolsheviks lose power immediately. And the people who propped up the Bolsheviks knew for sure they're weak people. They're not going to hold power for any length. And they took over power from the anarchists, right? So it's like Trotsky and Lenin knew what they were doing. They weren't stupid. They weren't the smartest people at the ball. That was Stalin was way smarter than those idiots. But they knew what they were doing. So they just kind of take over. Right. And they had it all planned out to some extent. I mean, as much as you can plan a revolution, it didn't go any of the way they thought it would. But like, that's the thing. Like, a revolution isn't even a political thing, because the first people involved in every single revolution ever are anarchists. And anarchists are people who identify against politics, government, and structure. That's the definition of anarchy. That's what
it's like the music and musical chairs. It just opens up the door for opportunity. Like, that's all it does.
Random opportunity. And so Robespierre can't control the revolution, and it ends when everybody who started it gets eaten by the machine, and somebody comes in and enforces top-down power from above. And of course, that also doesn't work, because effectively he does it wrong. See my video on the French Revolution with Adam. It's excellent. All right. And that also doesn't work. It shatters and breaks apart. And that's the pattern. It's a very clear pattern. It happened in England too. It happened in England before France. It's just that they didn't get the message. They were looking at us, at the US, going, well, we know how to have a successful revolution. We funded one. And it's like, you guys didn't even understand what was going on. Your own spies in the United States were saying, this experiment's going to end any day now. So the people in France didn't believe that our revolution had worked, and yet they were doing their own. The whole thing's dumb. It's full of dumbness.
Wait, but okay. Just look this up. Some members of the public initially complained that the machine was too quick and cynical, but before long, the process had evolved into higher entertainment. People came to the revolution in droves to watch the guillotine do its grisly work, and the machine was honored in countless songs, jokes, and poems.
Okay, that's a lie. Let me explain to you why. If you listen to Dan Carlin, he has an episode called Painfotainment. It's 4.5 hours or something ridiculous. It's very hard to listen to. Very hard. It's basically about the fact that up until just after what you're talking about, the French Revolution, public execution was high entertainment. And it was more than entertainment, right? It was ritualistic and liturgical. And actually what he talks about is it became mere entertainment with the introduction of the efficiency of the guillotine. And so
when was the guillotine employed?
What was the guillotine what?
When was the guillotine employed?
In the just before the French, well, as a result of the French Revolution. Like, before that, no one cared, because it wasn't adopted immediately. Like, no one used it until they needed to kill lots of people, right? And they took the ritual out of it, because prior to that, and Carlin goes into this. It's an excellent Painfotainment. It's an excellent episode if you can bear to listen to it. It's hard.
I guess I admit, like, I'm not as informed on you on this, but it does seem like we're saying that before there wasn't as much need as guillotine, and I would say that, like, it seems that there wasn't the quickness of it. There was a different set of liturgy and everything like that. And then we have this sort of use of the guillotine. And I would assume that there would be a difference in understanding it as entertainment. I mean, if you're going from something that isn't used.
Sure, it got reduced to entertainment, and that was horrific and bad.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not like nobody watched people being killed before that. They most certainly did.
Yeah.
So nothing changed.
That probably caused a change in people, that they're using the guillotine more. And now that this sort of chaos of everybody's getting killed is going to change people. And now they're more okay with it. Like, that's it. That's chaos.
I don't think they were more okay with it, dude, because they were happy to let Napoleon rule over them. Like it just opened the door for tyranny. I mean, this is remember.
I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten
made.
about the Vendée. That's all the good Catholics down in the south of France
fighting the good fight. But this is Pageau's point. Like he actually talks about this. He says, whenever you have chaos, right? Whenever the rules and order breaks down, people cry out for a tyrant. And then like the French Revolution is like, really? Like, if you don't look at the French Revolution and realize what Pageau is saying is 1,000,000,000% correct, I don't know what to tell you. Like you need to read another book or something because you kind of missed the pattern. And the thing about that is that, and I go over this again in my video with Adam. Adam's awesome, by the way. So you should watch all my videos with Adam. The thing about that is because Napoleon misunderstands everything, and he really does. Like he just doesn't get it. He names himself emperor in all kinds of places, and that's like an invalid way to do things. And so it doesn't work. Like everybody feels oppressed and upset, but they won't go back to the revolution. And so when he escapes from Elba, from his first exile, everyone's like, well, we don't have a better alternative, so we're going to send the remainder of our population to die with this idiot who hates the French, by the way, because France's greatest general is not French. It's just hysterical, right? He's Corsican. And he hates the French because they destroyed his family and took all his family wealth. So effectively, he's happy to kill off as many French as he can. Anyway, it's the same pattern you see with later dictators. It's pretty funny, except it's horrific. But yeah, also funny. Funny to us now. How's that?
So did Napoleon have power?
Well, yeah. I mean,
you can't stop me. I spend 30,000 lives a month.
Exactly.
So let's talk about how was Alexander the Great's power different from Napoleon's power?
Because he made sure that he was going to be added to every pantheon that he passed through.
Yeah.
What was his method?
Right. What he did was he used the Roman method, or maybe the Greek. Maybe the Romans got it from the Greeks. I don't know. Time periods, right? But like he used the method of adoption, and like had Napoleon done what everybody else before him had, like I said, he just made a stupid ass mistake. Had he done what everybody else before him had done, it might have worked. That's the funny. Like had he taken the honorifics from each place and placed them on himself. And I'll give you an example. So Napoleon declares himself Holy Roman Emperor, although I don't think he got all the land. Maybe he did. I forget whether or not he got all of it. When he declares himself that, though, he just says, I'm the Holy Roman Emperor. Right? But the Holy Roman Emperor, the one previous to him, had something like 80 or 120 titles. And the thing about titles is they're specific to regions. And so that you want the flattening of the world and the intimacy. Because I talked about this like a day or two ago. I don't believe it's coming up again. There's the flattening of the world, right? Where you're like, I'm Emperor of Europe. It's like, wait, what? You have an Emperor of Europe? You have to have a King of France and a King of Germany and a King of the Netherlands and a King of
a Duke of Normandy and a Duke of Tuscany.
Right. You need all those titles.
A Duke of Bavaria and a
That's
Baron
enchantment,
of
right? Because what you're doing is each title is an icon or a handle or however you want to think of it that conveys the quality of the relationship that the person has to the place. And that quality of relationship has to be different to each place because each place is different. And if it's not, you're flattening or reducing or compressing the world.
So time out. What you just said is it sounded quite propositional. Like this idea of title is a very.
I have to say it in words, but no, I use the word icon.
No, the idea of title. Icon is different because you're mixing things here. You can claim a title, and you can use power to grab a title.
Not all titles are icons, but some are.
Right, but you have to do something additional than just claim a title. You have to use a method in order to get this into the people's worldview who actually ascribe the power associated with that title.
But Corey, if you're not willing to take the title, you also can't do the ritual.
No, sure.
I agree with you. I wasn't going to get into the whole thing about you have to take the title. You have to take the title seriously. Then you have to enact the ritual in each place to be official in each place. Now, Napoleon didn't have time for any of that, for one thing, because he was busy, building a big empire very quickly, by the way, very quickly. By any standard, he just, bowls over all these chaotic, roughly city-states, like especially in Italy. Italy was always city-states. It's not a country. It's still not a country. It's not going to be a country ever.
There's no such thing as Italian food. That's how you explain it.
There you go. There's no such thing as Italian food.
So right. I want to just bring this back. Maybe I misunderstood, but I feel like the Joker certainly has power in exactly the same way as somebody like Alexander the Great, and using authority to take up these titles.
Is it Joker or is it Caesar Romero?
So, no, is direction of attention to mold people's worldview not a form of power?
Joker doesn't mold anybody's worldview. That's how Trey started, and he's correct. He doesn't. That's the whole point. He has no focus. Like identification against. So if I say your government's silly because your king has no clothes, I directed your attention for sure, but I directed it against a thing. I didn't direct it towards anything, and therefore it's not power. Right? Does it destroy power or structure or both? Does it destroy order? Does it create chaos? Yes. But any idiot can create chaos, and therefore we're all equally powerful. That's
okay. So you're using power in a way that presupposes it has to lead to a new form of order. It can't just be chaos. It can't just be negation.
No, I'm just saying there's an asymmetrical definition, because the world is actually asymmetrical at all layers of analysis. At all, we'll say self-similarly fractal layers, right? It's asymmetrical, and so you can't just reverse it. Power is focused energy. It's not energy per se, right? And again, we do equivocate on the word, and maybe we have to because words are imprecise, and that just sucks. Language sucks. Don't know what else to say. Right, to Josh's point, like, yeah, if lightning hits you, it's powerful, but it's not the same power as people talk about wielding, right? Because people very much talk about wielding power, which means it's focused towards some sort of goal. And I would say destroying something is not actually a goal. It's not even the opposite of a goal. But
okay, so that's where the issue is. It's because you use the word goal in a very specific way that implies you are moving towards some form of being rather than negation of some form of being.
Yeah, negation is not the opposite of non-negation.
Okay, now I'm following.
Right.
Now I'm following.
Right. That's the problem, is a lot of people get stuck in the binary thinking. See my video on navigating patterns. The binary thinking, and then they can't understand things because they expect them to be, to go back and forth equally, and they don't. Right? Like, it's way easier to blow up the Twin Towers, whether you use a truck bomb, which they tried first, or an airplane to do it, than it was to build them. Like, that's right. There's just asymmetry everywhere, but especially in, I don't want to call it creation, I want to call it manifestation. So especially if you build something, anything, an organization, right, with no headquarters, but you could build an organization with no headquarters, right? That's way harder than taking one out and making it, turning it into chaos. Way harder to build it than it is to take it apart or destroy it.
So out of curiosity, when, like, some people will, and I've kind of done it myself, I'm not arguing with you or anything, I'm just, like, curious. Some people will talk about different forms of power, like political or status or money or physical force. And so when it comes to physical force, it could be used for good or bad. It could be used for self-defense. It could be used to, in police work. It could be used in bad stuff, in violence. So
that's how you know it's a bad frame.
So if you're saying
it seems like
violence and bad stuff is not power, How would you explain it?
So it would be the case that, let's say there's an active shooter and the policeman goes in and uses his gun to take down the active shooter, right? His goal, unless this guy was a psychopath in a uniform, his goal isn't to go around killing people. His goal is to protect the public order. And so he has this higher end towards which he is oriented as a public servant. And in order to carry that out, because this guy is an active shooter, he takes him out with
basically
his pistol.
Murderer. Yeah.
So it's a matter of even if you're destroying something, if it's actually going to be properly goal oriented, it's because you want some greater good to come in where you're destroying, right? So if I were to go downstairs and take a sledgehammer to the kitchen, just because I like smashing things, that would not be a good exercise of power right there. But, if you're going to demo the kitchen so you can build a better one, that's a completely different story right there. So
right, but that's
the destruction has to be a part of something bigger than itself in order for it to be a part of a goal-oriented action.
But at that point, that's the bigger point. Like when you say something like power, you haven't said anything of any use to anyone, because power is the power good or bad? Power is neutral. It could be good, it could be bad.
So okay, so I got a bullet here. This is not powerful. Like, why? Because it's not placed and focused inside of this. Like, as soon as it's placed and focused inside of this, then it's powerful. And it has to be held by somebody with an intelligent brain and aimed at something. Then now we have something powerful. But
we don't even know if it's good or bad yet, because it depends on who's
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And no, I'm tracking with you. And I mean, but there's many layers between like this little. I mean, this is just an encapsulated component of elements that can go. And I mean, I throw this into a fire. There's nowhere telling where it's going to go. But then, as soon as it's placed inside of this, then all of a sudden, it now we have something. Now we have a focus. Now we have we even put sights on these. Why? So we can laser focus it.
Right. And that's the thing. When people talk like that, they're engaging in sorcery, right? And maybe they don't realize it. Fair, like whatever. But I'm a pragmatist. I don't care your intent. I can't know your intent. I don't care. I have no access to people's intent, or whether they're intentional or ignorant. There's no way to determine that in most cases. You can eventually, but not with a single statement. So it's just a bad frame. And the important part is to know a bad frame. Like the quicker you recognize a bad frame, the better. And so somebody was telling me last night on Discord, they were like, "Oh yeah, I pay attention to this YouTuber," and this YouTuber was saying that the reason why the Ukraine war is going on so long is because the West didn't invest in surface-to-air missile technology. Okay, now
Corey, tell us. No. Has the West invested in surface-to-air missile technology?
We invented it.
We're not entering. Nope. Not
that. Well, no, but the guy's YouTube thesis was based on that fact, and that fact couldn't possibly be less true. Like it's impossible for some statement to be less true than that, right? Since we invented surface-to-air missiles for all intents and purposes, and we've continually developed them for years and years and years. And so all of the things the guy says after that have to be wrong. It doesn't mean that accidentally he won't say something correct, because accidentally everybody says something correct, right? And accidentally some people say something wrong too, right? Even when they're right about everything. Like that's but it's a good tell for not listening to anything the guy has to say, because and the same person did the same thing with a book written by this guy William Ferguson, where he was positing that no one's going to understand why Germany in the mid to late 1300s stopped growing and stopped farming, and it's like or about the plagues, one of the two. And everybody I've told this to on both accounts has just been like, whoa, time out, hold on. So you got to know when these people come up with bad frames, because it's like, okay, because they can spin you a good story if it's based on a lie. It's not hard to spin a good story based on a lie. And then it's easy for people to get fooled and say, well, that sounds reasonable and logical, and it probably does, but it might be based on a falsehood. And they may not know that it's based on a falsehood. They may have no idea. But that's the problem, right? And there's so much wrong with why the West is losing the war in Ukraine. Well, the West isn't fighting Russia technically, and shadow war, whatever. You can get into all that, but it's a weird way to think about what's going on, right? Like, and that's the problem, is people fool you into thinking, oh, this is a valid way to think about the world, like politics, and then it just turns out to not be useful. And it takes you a long time to figure that out. It takes people decades to figure out things like, oh, the predictions of people who use political framing are always wrong. Always.
Hey, Mark, I'm curious. Have you read the book? Actually, that's funny. The Age of the Unthinkable. You heard of this book? Written by a guy named Ramo. You'd probably like it. It actually made me think of you because of the age of Gnosticism that you're always talking about. Age of Gnosis. That's what it is.
Age of Gnosis. Yeah.
Yeah. You'd like it. He talks about. It's very much at a. It's written to a lay level. I think he's a journalist, if I remember right. But he talks about this problem, how kind of in the last few decades, policymakers and economists and military strategists and things like have been completely and utterly failing to predict anything that happens, and all of the strategies and all of the economists and all the crazy stuff that has been upending our world. It's like just how their paradigm is stuck in particular ways. And he actually kind of ends up at a place of complexity theory and kind of organic, right. he arrives right on the edge of collective consciousness and kind of stops there. I disagree with this conclusion, but the stuff that he looks at it's really kind of neat. I thought you might have read it.
No, I haven't. It sounds good. Taleb talked about that. Right? He just basically says all economists he's backed up on it. He said all economists are frauds, right? Because all their predictions are wrong.
I think he talked about, I can't remember which economist it was, but he talked about one economist who received a Nobel Prize, and he basically used his Nobel Prize speech to apologize for the study of economics.
Yes.
And about how like everybody who thought this was the big new science that was going to solve the world were completely wrong, and that he was basically apologizing for winning a Nobel Prize.
Yep.
Wow.
Even Thomas Sowell?
I don't remember the name.
Thomas Sowell? Thomas Sowell's the best. He's one of the few that is right about a bunch of stuff, but it's no surprise given his economics.
I remember the Thomas Sowell video that I watched, and I was like, oh, this guy's real sharp, was where he talked about Africa, and he talked about, well, what are some of the problems with doing trade in Africa? And you've got lots of mountain ranges, lots of thick, impenetrable jungles, and no navigable rivers.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, wait a minute. That doesn't have anything to do with colonialism. And you would be correct. There's no colonialism there. And what's the most economically developed part of Africa? It's the one with the big old river going through it, right? That allows movement, and it's just...
This is where I put in my plug for airships or the technology of the future.
Yes, steampunk forever, baby.
I'm 100% serious, by the way.
But that's not some nerd sitting down and looking at a bunch of numbers and looking at a bunch of widgets and trying to like game the numbers, and so that the numbers start looking good. That's somebody who's like trying to figure out how to make things work and realizes, wow, we've got a lot of really hard hurdles if we want to move goods and people and services across this area, because it's just really difficult to navigate terrain. Well, so it's almost like he's not really even an economist at that point. If the Nobel Prize is what we rank as economists, it's like it's a little more spiritual even.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's a great story. I probably saw it on PBS at some point. So the drug company Merck, who I'm not a particular fan of, but Merck goes out and and this is years ago, I think it was in the 90s. They invent a cure for river blindness. Now, the market for a cure for river blindness is approximately negative $2 billion or something stupid, like legitimately, right? Because the people who have river blindness don't produce goods that are easily converted into currency of any kind anywhere in the world, right? Because they're the poorest of the poor, right? They live in the middle of nowhere, to your point, in Africa, places you can't get to. And Merck, because most companies, certainly in the 90s, are not complete scumbags, decide to develop the drug, make enough to service everybody that they estimate has river blindness, and give it away for free. And on top of all of that, they're like, we'll actually fly it into a port in Africa. It's amazing. It was a huge cost to the company. Now, it's not $1 billion, right? But it's probably $100 million, plus the cost of developing the drug for river blindness, which was probably $1 billion, maybe a little bit more. So the company's just throwing away this money, literally throwing it away, right? For the good of humanity, which is what most companies do, by the way, contrary to popular modern belief. Most companies actually do things like, they do lots of things like this, actually. So what happens is they're like, the only problem we can't solve is how to distribute it. So you guys are on your own. and people did figure it out. Like volunteers came in and figured out, they got this bicycle trading network thing going where people are doing bikes and boats and everything to get the drugs to the people that need them. And yeah, it's an amazing tale, right? Because there's no way to do it in a money-based economic system. Like the currency would not work to distribute that drug in that place at all. But there's a better way to do it that doesn't cost any money, right? And we don't account for that. We're so cynical, right? Everything's money. We flattened it all. We flattened the world again to money. And that's just not the way the world works. Thankfully, let's be grateful. Let's be grateful for that, shall we?
Yeah.
Nice to have some good news every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, nobody knows that story. I don't know why. I don't know why everybody doesn't know that story. It's a great story.
You haven't told it to enough people yet, Mark. You should make it like a little documentary about it.
On PBS, for freak's sake. Like, come on, guys. It was free TV. It used to be good. PBS is evil now, but they were very good in the 70s, 80s, and 90s at least.
We had the Red Green Show, yeah. Anybody here? Anybody ever see the Red Green Show? Josh has seen it.
Yes. Red Green. I couldn't hear you first. That was awesome.
Hey, keep your stick on the ice.
I'm a man, and I can change if I have to, I guess.
My mom is the duct tape queen. Like, she homeschooled 4 boys and 1 girl. There was 5 of us. Dad was gone, working an hour and a half away from town. And my mom fixed everything with duct tape. She loved Red Green.
Classic.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
The contraptions they made for the shows were amazing. Like, oh my god.
Well, Red Green, plus they brought in all the British stuff, including Blake 7, which, as everybody knows, is the best science fiction show of all time. And things like The Prisoner and other great. Yeah, Red Dwarf, Faulty Towers. They brought it all in.
Yeah.
The original Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy miniseries format, that was on PBS.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I grew up watching Mystery.
Oh yeah, Mystery. Yeah, they did all that. Yeah, they had all kinds of great masterpiece theater.
First, it was hosted by Vincent Price, and then Diana Rigg took it over. It was cool.
Well, yeah, they brought in the original Avengers. If you haven't seen that, with Patrick McNee and Diana Rigg, excellent stuff.
Wow.
Marvel comic book,
they
just to be clear.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, not Marvel Comics. And if you watch the original Avengers, especially the Diana Rigg episodes, and then you go and watch the Spy Who Shagged Me.
Oh god,
it'll be much funnier, I assure you.
Because those Austin Power movies, like, anybody could watch them, and if you were in the mood for that kind of middle school, potty humor, it kind of hit the spot. But once you see the British stuff it was based on, it's like,
that first one is billions of times funnier if you know the Avengers. It's a lot funnier, and then the others become very not funny by comparison. But Yeah, it's a lot funnier. But also Cosmos. I mean, they funded and did Cosmos, and I'm a big Carl Sagan fan.
that was kind of a mouthpiece for reductionistic materialism. Sometimes
it did destroy the world, but I still liked it.
Black holes are really cool. Neutron stars are really cool.
I mean, I would make the same argument about prog rock. I really like early Yes. I really like Dream Theater. I really like heavy metal. Right?
But how did that destroy the world?
There was I don't remember.
Nobody's listening to it. How could it possibly destroy the world?
No, it influenced everything.
I don't remember if the show was.
But that's the story. Like, that's the untold story. Like, there is a point to, and Taleb makes this point, there's a point to small numbers of people move the world. That's absolutely true. The point he makes is every beverage in the United States that's sold as kosher, all of them. The number of Jews in the United States is like between 8 and 13% of the total population. Why the hell is right? And it's just an economic argument. It's not the Jews control the corporations that make. It's not. It just turns out that it's cheaper for corporations to just get everything blessed by the rabbi than it is for them to do separate printing and shipping.
A fillet of fish was invented so that Catholics could go to McDonald's on a Friday.
There you go. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing.
Now, is that one economic or spiritual?
It can serve both roles. Right? There's no need to divorce things that could be joined together.
All right. Well, I
appreciate fish sandwich.
I appreciate you guys giving me the ability to be virtually not alone on Super Bowl day, but I'm gonna start heading towards bedtime.
All right, Corey. Good to see you, man. I hope you're doing well, man.
See you guys. Yeah. You too.
Where's our Texas conversation? When's that happening, man?
Hopefully. I mean, I have to finish my proposal first to send to the speakers, but it's coming along.
Awesome. Good news. Looking forward to seeing more.
Love you guys.
Speaking of conversations, have you guys seen this yet? I'm pulling it up right now. It's a conference that Bishop Barron's putting on in August. And it's actually something I'm very happy to see
Is it in
happening.
DC?
Not in DC. It's in his diocese. It's in Rochester. It'll probably be. Oh, I've lost it. Okay, let me see if I can. Rochester, Minnesota, which is where the Mayo Clinic is, and the Mayo Clinic treats Saudi princes.
I did not hear about this.
The Wonder Conference, August 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, the Rochester Mayo Civic Center. I want to highlight this because here we are. It's got Bishop Barron. He's there. He's doing his thing. And then we've got, oh my gosh, he's going to get Jonathan Pageau there. And then Robert Spitzer, who's a really sharp. I know he's got the SJ after his name, but he's one of the good ones. Don't worry about it. And then Abigail Favale, who's been doing some anti-feminist stuff.
What's SJ?
That's the Jesuits.
Oh, he is. Oh, okay. I thought that's what it was.
One of the good ones. He is a Father Big Mac approved Jesuit.
Okay.
And then the better half of the
no way.
And Dr. Vervaeke. It's like,
wow,
this could really kick butt.
Fascinating. Well, only if they push back on all the bad ideas. But yeah, we'll see.
Well, listen, Mark, if you came to that, you could push back on the bad ideas all by yourself.
Ooh. I'm not going to push back on Vervaeke's bad ideas. We've been over this before. That's not fair. That's just not fair.
That's only like a 5-hour drive for me, and I'll be back from Washington D.C. then. So,
you will?
Wow.
Yeah. I think my last class in D.C. is July 20-something.
Oh. Oh, I didn't realize that.
July 30th is when my last exam is. So I can make it back to Rochester for that.
Nice.
Okay.
That's cool.
So anyway, I'm not saying that I'm going yet.
So I have to go to Minnesota. I have to find a way to go to Minnesota in August.
You might. I'll just call. I've got buddies in the Diocese of Winona, Rochester. I can just call them and they'll put me up. It's nice having connections. Anyway, so yes, Bishop Barron has always been touching the Petersons here, but only with the gentlest, most Episcopal hand.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is an interesting lineup.
Well, I think he notices the problem that you're noticing, right? The recession of the church and like us just kind of being off in our own little world. And he's going to be like the one to try and bring some of these worlds together,
Well, he should hire me as a consultant. I'm upset that Monsignor Shea won't be there because that's the guy he needs. Like, I don't even like, you need Shea, dude. Like, let's bring in the big guns. Let's bring in the expert. Like
that's
he
what
knows
we're going to talk about next week, right? If you're wondering who Mark and I are talking about with this Monsignor Shea character, it's going to be the 12 points of neo-Gnostic progressive religion. That'll be my opening rant next week, going over those from Monsignor Shea's newest book, which he didn't put his name on because he's humble. But everybody knows he wrote it.
Hey, Father, I got a random... it was something that Paul brought up, and it never really got followed up. But do you mind if I, like a random side trail real quick?
I think we'd gotten to the bottom of that, so go ahead.
Okay. So Bishop Barron, a while back, was talking about his favorite show on TV. And he talked about Miss Davis. I watched it, and I actually really enjoyed it. Like, but did you happen to watch that? And okay,
I don't really watch TV. When I heard Pastor Paul talking about it, I'm like, Your Excellency, I'm not sure. Sometimes I really, Bishop Barron's done a lot of good. Like his videos on YouTube have brought people out of reductionist materialism and into the Catholic Church, which I'm a big fan of. And so I'm just going to keep on like giving him the old thumbs up, telling him to keep on doing his thing, because materialism, in my mind, is the really big enemy. Because is that culprit number one for flattening the world there? It might be. It's definitely in there.
Probably
every once in a while, he just says these things, and I'm like, I don't know about
No,
that.
I've been waiting to hear somebody else watch the series, because I don't know. That happened to come out right when we were around confirmations, and Paul had talked about it and was like saying how Bishop needed to walk that back. And I was just, I don't know. It was one of those things. It was a pretty big television show. I don't know if it's up for season 2 anytime soon or if it ever will be, but it was interesting to me. It really was.
What was salient to you? What stood out?
It focused. Okay, so it focused around the nun, and Christ in the movie is like very personal to her. Like she's married to Christ basically, and all that involves, and it gets like physical with it. Like it, and there was a lot of like.
Not that physical, right?
What's up?
Not that physical, right?
Well, so she keeps her. I mean, I'll just speak a little bit frankly. Like she keeps her virginity and her vows, and then like at one point she kind of gives herself away to Christ in a moment of self-pleasuring, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, it's very strange. And like that was what like it was almost like as a product, like when I was a like looking at through Protestant eyes and that, I'd be like icky, like ew, this is a gross show, like this is gnarly, like this is not Christian, this is something. But I don't know, there was something about it that was like, I guess I guess I resonated with it because it was my process has been icky. It's been weird at times. Like my moving towards Christ, like it's not always been this Hallmark card moment. It's been very like I got a lot of problems and I got a lot of things that I've had to work through in my life, and that's what I guess I appreciate about the show is it was with at the risk of sounding ridiculous, it was beautifully raw. I guess you could say it got down to like the nuts of like I don't know.
So Josh, let me help you out. So I think Sally Joe talks about this as dark testimony, right? The testimony of your struggle to remain in faith, or your inability to remain in faith, right? Like I'm not in faith because, right? I don't have faith because of this, right? And yeah, I mean, I can understand the attraction of that. I think the problem with that is that, so Paul Vanderklay has the one man, one woman for life thing that so good. Damn it, Paul, if you get that down to 25 minutes, man, you'd be a YouTube phenom, right? But in there, he talks about the purpose of the church is to uphold the highest ideal, even if it's unattainable.
Yeah.
And you run the risk whenever you're signaling something that isn't ideal. You run the risk of either pointing in a neutral across or down fashion. And that I think is the danger. And I'm not saying that's an easy problem to fix, or, I'm not making a claim about how to resolve that. I'm saying that seems to be the difference, we'll say, between like the Catholic position on until recently anyway, on gay marriage and the Protestant position, right?
Until recently, had something changed?
Who knows? Nobody can tell me. It's like, well, if you read it this way, the Pope said this, but if you read it this way, the Pope said that. And the Pope's not really being clear about this anymore. And boy, it would be nice if we went back to no, because it's real easy and clear. Like I like.
Hey, Mark, be at peace. It's a no.
I hope so.
Okay, look, I'm a priest.
There's a lot of muttering out there, Father Eric, about everyone's arguing about how no it is all of a sudden. But yeah, that's more the issue is that you do see this problem manifest after hundreds of years of Protestantism, right? Where they're not always aiming up in the same way. They don't always have the same tools, right? They don't have the symbolism. They don't have the same type of music, right? They don't have the same liturgy. They don't have tradition. And so that causes a problem in this constant schisming, right? Because it's unavoidable at that point. And maybe some of the pointing either across or down is contributing to that. And I don't know any of this. I'm just saying, like, boy, it's weird that these things go together.
And there's something else I want to point out is we could look at the ecstasy of Saint Teresa of Avila, right? And just the kind of the phenomena of nuns going into ecstasy in general, right? Which you don't get very often with male saints. Male saints are certainly passionate, certainly full of vigor, certainly full of love for our Lord, but it manifests itself in a much more masculine way. And you could and C.S. I think it was C.S. Lewis, and if it wasn't C.S. Lewis, it was probably G.K. Chesterton. Said, "Okay, listen, what would you more want to explain to a small child, right? About how the Holy Spirit can come into your heart, or how babies are made?" It's like, actually, that the Holy Spirit, coming into your heart and bringing new life, that's the exemplar, and how babies are made is the physical expression of that. It's like the lower level of that. So I haven't seen Miss Davis. I don't know exactly what happened in the scene that you're describing. They could be grasping at that truth and doing a really bad job because they're in Hollywood and it's really not a holy place.
Yeah, no, it just, I haven't made it all the way through Dante's Inferno. I started listening to an audio book, and I've gotten through parts of it. But I mean, there's some pretty graphic images, and there's some pretty, like at least for me as a guy in this day and age, like as I'm listening to them, like some of it's bizarre, some of it's weird. It's very strange. But that was some of what I found. I think, like kind of in Miss Davis, it was this wild show that seemed I found myself agreeing with Bishop that it like I like the show. I was like excited for season 2. I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of cool because like anyways, I've just been interested in talking with somebody about it, and I need to rewatch it because like it got weird and like it got out there, but at the same time, I feel like it was always grounded in kind of a higher. There was always a higher truth in the whole thing.
Like some people that I trust their imagination a lot more than their philosophy. I bet you if Peter Gabriel and I sat down and started talking about like religion and politics and governance, I bet you we disagree on all sorts of things. But like, I think his imagination is like spot on and never led him wrong. Like when I listen to The Lamb Lays Down on Broadway, right? It's just this crazy, surreal, like dream, ridiculous craziness. But it's like, holy mackerel, that guy was on to something when he was kind of tapped into that subconscious portion of himself. And I think because Peter Gabriel, he was the original lead singer for Genesis and then spun off in his own solo career. I think because he was limited to the medium of music and everything had to be poetic and musical, that let his imagination shine forth and his probably really boring and banal political ideas like just not get in the way of that. Whereas film doesn't have the same kind of safeguards around it. So there can be a possibility of there being something there. But I'm not going to recommend it to Mrs. McGillicuddy from the parish council because she probably just won't get it.
Yeah, no, and I can appreciate that, and I can like it was just I don't know. Like I said, it was one of those shows that's been a big question mark in my head ever since I watched it, and it was very couched in Catholicism. There was a lot of things in there. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I've been interested to it was kind of like my same experience with the movie. Oh shoot, it just came out. It's about demonic possession. No, it had the guy from Boondock Saints in it, and he's a prisoner. He's about ready to face execution.
Oh, that's Nefarious.
Nefarious, thank you. Oh, sorry, that escaped me. That was such a great movie. I like
the first 2/3 of it. I thought it fell apart in the last bit, but
really?
The first 2/3 of it were great.
No, I don't know, man. I just loved it all the way through, and like, I mean, I got chills when he was doing, when he did the abortion thing, and like, just like I don't know, just like I didn't even recognize that guy. I don't know. I watched Boondock Saints a long time ago when I was a kid, and I don't know. Me and my brothers always loved it, but it was a ridiculous movie. But actually, we just always loved it for some reason. But it like I didn't even recognize that guy, like his ability to flip and everything like that. And yeah, I agree.
He was easily the best part of the movie. I mean, he absolutely freaking nailed it.
Yeah, no, and we have movie night at our local parish, and they showed that, and but which I need to get to movie night. I'm horrible about making it to it, but but need to participate in my community. But it anyways, just some movies like this, like I see things differently now after listening to Pageau and listening to Jordan and listening, to you guys and Vanderklay and everything. Yeah,
when things open up. Yeah.
It's like, and so now when I'm watching Miss Davis, I'm not like, oh, this is just some ridiculous show. Like, but like I said, if I had watched this like I don't know, maybe, somewhere around 7 years ago or something like that, I'd been like, oh, maybe a cool show, whatever. It's talking about AI. It's talking about like, this or that. But there was some interesting parts about the guy in the show. He plays like a cowboy, but he's not an authentic cowboy. You find out like he's not what he thought he was, because his whole like backstory was actually faked from the time he's a child. And there's this whole thing where he ends up having to go to this roller coaster ride from like hell, and he ends up basically he has to know that he's gonna die in order to really to really live, I guess you could say, or something like that. He has to come face to face with like his death, and he does. Yeah, and he does, and he does it
very
bravely.
Ancient Greek, by the way, very.
Dude, it was. There were so many things like that in the show that it was like that I've been wanting to talk to somebody of higher learning and that to see what they thought, because I thought, okay, I'm seeing a lot of things here, but I don't know how to interpret them. I'm not educated in this sphere. I'm not educated.
I don't think you have to. I like, Father, you've got to clip that statement that you trust somebody's imagination more than their philosophy, because that really is it. Like, I mean, that's why conversation makes everything worse, not better, right? Because you can't trust philosophy and you can't trust the discussions, because they're subject to insane amounts of interpretation on both ends. Like, my thoughts, and I know Josh feels this way, he's talked about it, right? Like, my thoughts are imperfect when they come out. Like, I'm not able to perfectly represent my thoughts when I speak. And then the problem is I have to represent them not the way they come out of my head, which I can't do already, but I have to represent them in a way that the person hearing them will get what I'm saying, which is a totally different thing. Totally different, right? That's how you talk to yourself when you're alone. It's different from how you talk to somebody else about the same topic, right? You have to match their level and all that. And then I have no control over how you hear those and what you hear physically and how you interpret it, right? And so this is why conversation is so prone to error, like, because there's so many layers where errors are automatically, inevitably introduced, right? It's just no option to it. And so you want to trust someone's imagination. And a walk through the imagination is explicit in that we're not trying to be precise and accurate. And so it allows a level of flow, it's in flow state even, that you can't have in a philosophical discussion because you can't afford to. You have to define your terms. I did this earlier with Trey, like, what do you mean by power? Hey, you gotta make, what do you mean by politics, right? Like, you have to nail these things down in philosophy, but in flow, you don't. And then not to say never or nothing, but like, it's a very different mode of communication at that point, even though they're both using, say, propositions. But I like that because it's sort of like I trust somebody's intuition over their intellectualization.
Many such cases, I think. Many such cases. That's why I can listen to pop music, because like a lot of this pop music is written by degenerates who I wouldn't want near my family, but as it turns out, they've got that artistic feel for things, and when they're just kind of obedient to that, they can create a great work like Bat Out of Hell,
Well, again, prog rock destroyed the world. Also, still love Yes and all my other prog rock. I guess I just learned this from I forget the guy's YouTube handle, but he was talking about Nights in White Satin being the first prog rock song, and the history of it, the history of the Moody Blues and all that. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that. I wonder if that, I don't know what he was. Oh, Professor of Rock, that's his name. Interesting.
1956? That can't be the first prog rock.
That's where he nailed it at.
Oh, like, Nights in White Satin. Okay, that came out in 67. That 67. Could work. Yeah. Right. Okay. There's a KNIGHT that was an album in 76.
Oh,
no, NIGHT, which was a song in 76.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Proto-prog.
That's where he has it.
Wikipedia itself, no lesser an authority than Wikipedia, lists it as proto-prog.
There you go. Well, then it's done. But like just little, and I just learned that like a day or two ago. Never even thought about it. But yeah, there's a way in which that also destroys the world, right? And that song in particular is like, wow. You listen to the lyrics, like, oh, I was always on the edge. But to your point, like I do trust the intuition, and I think my fundamental problem is I don't trust anything anybody says ever, even though I use that to great effect. I only trust in intuition, and if they don't communicate intuitively, then I immediately mistrust and discount everything they say automatically.
How can you tell? I mean, how can you tell if somebody's speaking intuitively or not?
How can you not?
I'm hard of hearing in this, that's why I'm asking.
That's always been my problem. Like Sally and I joke about this, right? Like you can look at a bunch of people who are, let's say, bad people. Well, I do this with Charles Manson all the time. I'm like, you notice anything about Charles Manson? A lot of people go like, well, no, I mean, it's Charles Manson. I know who he is. And I'm like, you don't see the evil eyes? Because holy crap. Like that to me is like, I can't even see his damn face because his eyes are so evil. And you see, there's lots of people like that. I just look at pictures and I go, oh yeah, he's a murderer. And I'm always right about that. I don't know how. And I don't know why you people can't see this, but I really think you should learn quickly because it served me well in many situations.
Well, no, I mean, we've talked a little. I brought this up a long time ago about the 16 personalities and Jung. Like you can see it. Other people can't. Like we interpret like we're literally blind to it. Like there's certain intuitive things that you will pick up, Mark, that like you said, like I saw his eyes and I knew exactly what he was about. And then for me, like I'm listening to his words, I'm going like, okay, well this guy's kind of philosophical, like, and so I like my personality or whatever you want to say a personality is subject to getting enchanted very easily. Like I'm very because I don't watch the eyes. Like like you said, like I'm not for whatever reason, like I'm blind to that. Like I just don't. And so like I've had to realize that this is probably why I've like certain movie characters, certain music, it like looking back across my life, I've been enchanted by it. I've tried to live it out and not even knowing it. And I remember when the movie or the show Sons of Anarchy came out, and it was a very popular show, and like everybody watched it. It was and then everybody was on to Yellowstone. But before that, it was Sons of Anarchy. And I work with a lot of guys who aren't highly educated or anything like that. And I saw how that show impacted men, like across a huge swath of people. Like they became more violent. They became more prone to just getting in a fight for no reason. Right. I saw people start carrying knives, like in my small little town. Like I saw guys who had never been around a motorcycle gang or anything like that refer to a leather jacket as a cut. Like, things like that. Like, and all of a sudden, like it influenced like such a broad swath. And then Yellowstone comes around, and all of a sudden everybody's which was like, do not try to like that show was so like pointless, and even the director Taylor Sheridan was like, no, that show did not have a plot. I used it to just bring up random subjects that I thought were interesting about the West. Like listen to his interview on Joe Rogan. He's like, it doesn't have a plot. He's like, no, I just wanted to use it as a platform, as a to just what's that?
Me?
Okay.
It was a venue.
Just like No, he just used it to bring up a lot of Western kind of myths and stuff like that. But John Dutton in Yellowstone is a horrible character. He gets his kids killed. He gets everybody killed. He ruins people's lives, and somehow people are like, "Yeah, I want to be like John Dutton." And I'm like, did you watch the show? Like,
yeah. That happens a lot. That happens in a lot of movies. Yeah. There's a ton of movies like that. And I think we kind of touched on this in a previous stream, right? Where people are subject to things and they have no idea. I mean, that's why I always ask people to define terms like power in particular, like where are you getting your definitions from? Because you probably don't know what gave you that impression, right? And why you're there. Like Curtis Yarvin's a great example. Like a lot of his stuff is just like, I'm like, dude, where are you getting this stuff from? And like apparently this guy freaking I think it's William Ferguson or whatever. Like he wrote a book in like 1962 and he doesn't know about the plague. And that influenced the teaching, the college level teaching in in Australia, allegedly. I'm like, wow, like what influences are there, right? Like who has been influencing? So when you don't have a strong base, maybe you're in domicide because you don't have, we'll say, a strong spiritual home, right? You can get easily enchanted and moved around by the likes of Sam Harris.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people that I used to work for a guy, and he was like, he was talking about Sam Harris all the time, and I would talk about Peterson, and he was like, he'd bring up Harris, and I would be like, what is it about Harris you're so like attracted to? Because I haven't really heard that much out of him that I'm like, is that like mind blowing or anything? And he was like, he's just so articulate. I'm like, really? That's it? He can use words well? Like, I was like, that's all it takes? Yeah, no, I was like, that was when, like, because I had a hard time grasping the concept of enchantment. I just kept on hearing it, and all I could think is, like, enchantment, like fairy tales, like, what are we talking about here? And then when I listened to your video on it, I was like, okay, now I'm getting it. And then I saw it inside of Sam Harris, and I was like, okay, that's it. He can talk well. He's articulate. He, meditates, but he's also white. So he acts Eastern, but he's like and then I'm so open and I'm so this and I'm so that, but he's not. And but he's extremely.
Well, that's what I mean. Like most people, they listen to somebody and they go like, well, he said this. And I'm like, but everything he does contradicts that statement. And therefore, why are you listening to what he says? To me, that's the natural way to do it.
Right. Because I would take Sam Harris seriously if he said, well, yeah, of course human beings don't have free will. But if instead of he's saying, of course human beings don't have free will, it was, he looks like he hasn't slept for a week. He's got a cigarette in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, or a half-empty bottle of vodka next to him, and he's like, I don't know how human beings have free will. Right? And then like, okay, now this guy's actually taking this idea seriously. Because if you blow up the free will idea, it's like, guess what? Your experience of the world doesn't make sense. The way that you treat other people doesn't make sense. And our laws and customs don't make any sense whatsoever. Right? All three of those are completely gone. You can't just sit there and say, well, yeah, I don't have free will. What? It's just like, it's just completely incomprehensible to say that calmly.
Exactly.
And he does, which means like he's a better neighbor than his philosophy allows.
Yeah, and he hasn't thought about it. People who think about things, like usually if you're going to discuss something that you've thought about, the first thing that happens is that whatever speed you were speaking at, you slow down. You'll notice this with Peterson, right? He said, I can't get past it, right? He's like, I thought about this a lot and I can't get past it. Really, Jordan? And that's a pattern with him, right? Because that conveys authenticity. The problem is almost everyone's lost the ability to hear that, right? We've all, because there's people on forever on the internet, since I've been on the internet, going, I don't know why people can't understand sarcasm on the internet. And I'm like, this is the least mysterious thing that has ever existed in humankind. Of course, it's hard to convey sarcasm on the internet. Like, why wouldn't it? Sarcasm is conveyed through tone. In the early internet, there was no audio. Like, I don't like, why is this a mystery to you? Like, and people developed ways like smiley faces and stuff to express it, but that took a long time. And people to this day are like, I don't understand why they don't know I was being sarcastic, because sarcasm goes through tone. It's a tonal signal. And if you don't understand signals and how they work, and then if you want a new one, it takes a long time to propagate. And it's not going to propagate equally, and it's not going to be adopted equally, and it's not going to be interpreted equally. Then you don't understand how things work in the world.
My mom has severe hearing loss, and she can't tell sarcasm, so you have to explain it to her. She has trouble hearing it. So I'm like, yeah, very true.
Yeah. No, I had a girlfriend in middle school that was deaf, and I was not good at sign language, and like I didn't realize I was a sarcastic person until I realized like 90% of what I was trying to convey I couldn't. I was like, because I would try to joke with her, and then I was like, oh well, this isn't gonna work. That you have to there's nuance. Like you have to
you need a signal that flips meaning entirely. That's why when people are like, words have meaning, I'm like, you've never thought about this. It takes about 4 seconds of thought to figure out words don't convey meaning at all.
And I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem with guys like Sam is they assume that because we all speak English, we understand each other. And it's like, and it's like, no. And that's that was what was kind of revealed in his last interview with Peterson, when Peterson, I think, played a good move by staying quiet, because it just let, Sam run until he hung himself. And he said things. Yeah, exactly. No, it was. Peterson, he I don't know if he reads comments or what he does, but he definitely played that way different than his first, couple interactions. Yeah. And it worked, because then Sam said things like, "Yeah, we got to lobotomize, guys that might be evil," and it's like,
we're just gonna change the bad people so they're good.
Yeah, I can have my utopia,
regardless of what they want.
Well, through magic. Yeah. And it's only going to affect the bad parts and not the good parts, obviously.
Yeah,
because I said so.
They've never
not because there's any backing for this scientifically, just because
they've never seen the episode of Star Trek original series where there's a transporter accident and Captain Kirk is split into his aggressive side and his intelligent side, right? And how his intelligent side is actually kind of useless without that kind of aggressive edge that he had to him. And they had to untransporter accident to get the both of them back together, right?
Yeah.
Because people aren't that simple. They're a lot more complicated than that. And it's like your intelligence, it only can do anything because it's connected to a bunch of other things. So you can't just suck the evil out of somebody.
Well, and I don't know. I heard the quote a while back from Jung: people don't have personalities, personalities have people. And I don't know, I really liked it, because I was like, that's how I feel sometimes. I have modes. You get me angry, I'm gonna have a different personality. Yeah, when I'm happy, when I'm drunk, when I'm this, when I'm that. I'm a different person all the time. And people will be like, well, all of that is your personality. And I was like, no, it's not. It's fractured. It's you're only gonna get, in any given interaction, you're only gonna get one side of that. When I'm at church after mass, and I'm hugging everybody and saying goodbye to Father and everything like that. I'm as authentic as I can be, but I'm in a really good mood. I just, I'm really happy. In that where.
Holiness, what do you got, Father? Holiness, right, is etymologically located with the word whole, right?
Oh.
So you're actually an integrated human being when you become holy, and that everything inside of you actually serves God.
Yeah.
That's symbiosis right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting every personality to be facing up. Every side of your personality. Yeah. No, and that's I don't know, because I definitely have felt possessed in certain parts of my personality. There's certain times when I'm in a mode okay, this is going to play out and there's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's 3 o'clock. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten all day. I just got out of a tree. My adrenaline's up. I'm anxious or whatever. I remember this happened one time. I pulled up to an intersection, and these two kids with skateboards, which they weren't riding, they were carrying them. I was like, I don't know why you're doing that in the first place. But anyways, they like walked out in front of my car. I didn't have a stop sign or anything. I just didn't want to hit them. And like they walked out in front of my car, and they took their time. And I just got off work, and I just wasn't in the mood to play games or anything like that. And I kind of was like, what the heck? And I kind of put my hand up like that. And kid looked at me and was like, just went like that, and they just like took their time getting across for me. I'm not a person who gets in fights or anything like that. I got out of my car and I was like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, bro. Like, you want to talk about it? And I didn't realize until later when Jordan was talking about like eating, and like, cause I intermittent fast during the day, and then like, I don't usually eat until I get home, but I'm climbing trees and doing all sorts of other stuff. I didn't realize how aggressive I can get in the afternoon. Like right around 2 o'clock, like I had, yeah, big time. And I didn't realize that until like I realized that wouldn't have happened if that happened at 8 o'clock in the morning. Like I would just been like, whatever, stupid kids, but like because of when it happened and and so like that's when I realized, okay, I can be possessed. I can be, completely in a different mode, and I won't be aware of it or anything like that. But now my job these days is to orientate all of me up, and so like, so saying prayers, in the middle of the afternoon, things like that. Like, even just keeping my, crosses around reminds me, oh no, you're still a Christian, even when you're hangry, and you need to act like it, like, or even like, when, I was basically raised on a job site. I was homeschooled and put on a job site when I was like, I don't know, like 11 or whatever, doing labor jobs and everything like that, which, was really good for work ethic, but not great because of some of the guys I was working around and, their choices in humor and, all the things that that entails. And, so, when it's time to tell jokes at the job site or whatever, I'll find myself laughing or contributing to a joke, and I'll be like, that is probably not something I should be laughing or contributing to. Like that's, and so catching that, and becoming aware of that, where before it's like, that's my personality. Yeah, that's my personality. It's like, and just blaming it on, it's my personality. And it's like, no, it's not. It's like something has a hold of you. Something is
gripping you.
Yep. And it's pulling you in a direction, and, and you've been getting pulled in this direction. Like, that's why, like I said, I like the Jordan Peterson's personality work of the what is it, the 5 orientations of personality,
5 personality traits.
Yeah, so I like that, but that is always seeking what's better, like how to better yourself. It doesn't necessarily address people, because not everybody's trying to get better. Like I would say like 90% of the people you interact with throughout the day are going to just be fine where they're at, and you have to work with that. Like, because you can't, in an ideal world, everybody would be studying Big 5 and trying to get better. But not everybody's like that. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people are like, have you ever run into like an ENTJ? I mean, they're delusional, they're arrogant, they're borderline psychotic, but they get stuff done. It's like a CEO of a company or whatever who just doesn't stop. Like, I mean, they just don't stop no matter what. Nothing gets in their way. They're delusional. Like, they're literally, like, they don't interpret reality the same way. And then, like, like, if you happen to be working with one of those guys because they're the owner of a company that you're contracted out to or something like that, you just got to work with him, man. You just got to be like, all right, well, this is the guy I get to deal with today. And if you don't see them for what they are, like what Mark was saying, like, he can see the eyes, and that tells him all he needs to see. Like, and that, but he can see that. But for me, like, I don't know. It's probably a bad thing, but I the expression, don't judge a book by its cover. I've probably overlaid that onto people more than I should. And a lot of times maybe you should judge a person by their cover. But, because when you see their eyes or you see something about them, maybe that should be a tell-all. I don't know. But I'm pretty open.
What you're judging on. Right. What's the basis that you're judging on, right? Because a lot of that ends up being relevant if you've got somebody from a higher status looking down on somebody from a lower status and just assuming that because they don't run in the same circles and they don't go to the same clubs, that this isn't really a person whose opinion is worth considering, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a really bad way of judging people, right? Based on status. They could have all manner of complexity within them that you won't see. But actually, like, looking at somebody, like the way that they approach you in a very subtle way, right? People's eyes are very subtle. They're not cartoon eyes, right? We don't have the Ren and Stimpy eyes going on all over the place. So what you're seeing is a lot more subtle. But if you can learn how to like actually read people well, which involves a lot of, as far as I can tell, I mean, Mark's an outlier. He's an outlier and everything. So we're not going to worry about him too much, but it involves a lot of just watching and listening to people.
Yeah.
And if you just have the time to just sit there and like just observe them, observe what they say and then how they act, and like seeing that, then you can start to actually read people well. That's why in seminary, what they do is they just put you into a box and make you stay there, right? No, you can't live off campus. No, you can't get a job off campus. You're going to be with these guys. You're going to do everything together, right? You just kind of in this box and like,
it's like basic. We're just going to shove you all and conform you. Right. Like you're gonna come out the secret. Yep.
How to cooperate with people, and that means like reading the room. And so even though seminary oftentimes was like stressful and unpleasant, it's proven to be very useful, right? Because I can just like, oh, this person's upset. Okay, I've got to approach them as an upset person. They're not, what's going on here, gotta be smooth,
and I'm not
involved a lot of right. Like I get to focus on this because it's my job to attend to people, right? Your job is attending to trees. Like if you've got a lot more of your headspace devoted to trees, that makes sense. So
well, and
right
like
about the eyes, they tell you everything if you know how to read them.
Well, and like even like when I'm pruning like a tree, like I remember I taught myself a lot of things because like I didn't have I don't know why, but I've always wanted mentors in my life, but they seem to never show up. I've had to teach myself a lot of things in that. But I remember when I was pruning trees, I looked at branches as which one of you deserves to stay and which one of you should go. And I would look at like the diameter of the branches and I was like, well, you've been here longer and you're in a better position for light. That means you get to stay. Because you'll have like two overlapping branches and you're like, one of you's got to go. You're tangled up, but which one? Like which one? And so you look at the structure of them. Which one has better branching? Which one has a possible defect? Which one is this? And which one has that? And so like, I literally will stare at branching structures for like a couple of minutes before I make a cut. And I'm going through like a philosophical thought process in my head. And like a lot of people would be like, no, you cut that one because it's the lower one. They'll have some other way of going about their decision making. And we often will like in structural pruning, like I didn't realize I discovered structural pruning through like I could have just read a book, but I don't read. I do, but yeah. Anyways, I would just stare at it and I use my own understanding of like hierarchy and like this one's larger. It's been here longer. It's stronger. It deserves to stay because of this. And this one doesn't because it has more dead branches on this lead. And this one is more of a threat to the house because of the angle that it's at. And so that's why this one deserves to go. And then like I even would say things like afterwards we would cut down a tree and the homeowner would come out convinced that it was rotten inside, and it never was, but they wanted it out of there, and they were going to have it cut down by us or somebody else. And so we charged them maybe a little bit extra because the bottom line it just didn't need to come down. But they would come out and they'd stare at the stump and it was rotten inside. And I said, no, it was actually very sound, unfortunately. And I was like, there was no threat. The threat was all in your head, but then other times we would be like, no, that was a good kill. Like we would look at the trunk inside and be like, no, this thing was compromised. It was probably within a couple of years of doing something on its own. And so this was a justifiable removal, like in that. But we've had to cut down lots and lots of big, beautiful trees that just didn't need to come down. And but because it bothered somebody so much that it was like, this thing is like, and I would even tell people that I was like, bottom line, this is getting removed for your peace of mind. And if it bothers you that much that you're willing to pay $5,000 for the problem to go away, then yes, then we could do this. And we'll replant a fruit tree, something small next to the house, something like that. But it was, it was a very strange thing to think about the world. Like, that's how I've always thought about the world in those terms, is what deserves to go, what deserves to stay. And it usually comes down to, well, how long has something been here and how well has it done since it's been here? And that's the way and that's not reading the eyes. That, I guess in a way maybe it is, but it's like with Charles Manson or something like that. What has he actually done? Like what does he deserve? The death penalty? Does he deserve the most violent death? Like, I remember Rogan talked about one time a UFC fighter that had had violently assaulted somebody who had touched his child inappropriately. And he went to prison for it. And Joe Rogan was like, I just hope he used his hands. And he was talking like that. Like he was like, yeah, I just really hope he did that. And I was like, that's so interesting. You talk about peace and love so much, but I was like, why did you want to make sure that he did it in this way? Like, what was it about, like, this sin? Like, wouldn't you have been satisfied like the guillotine? Like, wouldn't you have been satisfied with that quick, efficient, killing? Why does he need to be tortured to death? Like in that. And so somehow the maximum amount of pain and effort that you could deliver to somebody was more. Now it's more just. Now it's better. Like, that's a better death for this person, because, like, you see what I'm saying there? Like, it's all in, like, how the thing was. It's not only in what decision was reached, but how it was reached. And that's what made people, like, that's what made the carrying out of it better or worse. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's an interesting way that people go about the way that they reach decisions, and the way that they execute those decisions is like, there's levels to it, and there's
But that's how they justify it, Josh. That's not necessarily how it happens. And people get confused. They think the way they rationalize something is the way it actually went down. And that's almost never the case. And people think, oh, well, the way I made this decision was, and it's like, no, you didn't. It didn't happen. Right? Oh, the way I know what power was is because it's like, no, you never even thought about it.
Mark, if somebody's confessing to sin, I think that would be an exception to that. When they're saying, they're
describing an action. No, they're describing an action that they know was wrong. They're not describing how they arrived at the action. And in fact, most sin confessions are, oh, forgive me, I don't know how this happened, but I did it. It's like, okay.
I hear a lot more confessions than you do, and it's usually simpler than that.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, it's simple. Like when somebody describes how they came to a conclusion, it's usually like an hour or 20 minutes of them talking. It's because rationalizations are like that. They're very complicated, right? And
well, it's like a neuron path, right? It's probably like a neuron path, like a rationalization and justification is like, okay, well, I did this because I did that, and because I thought this, and da 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 da. And so it's a neuron path through the woods.
But you couldn't have. But you couldn't have, right? Because all the things you're describing would have taken way more time than what happened.
Right?
Yeah. Like you can say, like, somebody broke into my house. So
rationality is imaginary?
Well, look, rational. I suspect, I can't prove this. I suspect all rationality is post hoc. It's after the fact. All of it. Okay. We don't rationalize anything up front. Like,
so, like, somebody commits a really bad sin. The demon got a hold of them. They did something really gnarly. Is the demon? well, that's what I'm saying. Is the demon is the evil feeding them the story of why they did this?
No. They can come up with the story on their own. I
mean,
so
is the story neutral? Is the rationalization neutral, or does it have an origin? Like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, in my own brain, like,
rationalization is neutral.
Okay.
And it's part of sense making, and it's part of understanding, or it's part of being able to be comfortable with the world around you and your role in it.
Yeah. So, like, after I'm sorry to be gross, but just airing some of my stuff. But, like, after I got divorced, like, pornography became a part of my life, because I was no longer with a partner. And that's how I justified it. I was like, well, this is like, you would supplement. I supplement, like, if I didn't have a nutrient, I would supplement it with like a vitamin or something like that.
Right. I have a desire. That desire needs to be filled. The way I was feeling that desire is gone, and therefore.
Yeah, and therefore.
You do that all the time.
Is that rationalization? You're saying that's neutral. That's not the demon feeding me a line.
It's almost like rationalizations are model generators. And all models lie and some models are useful.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, a rationalization is, what model was I using when I acted out in the world? And it's like, well, maybe you know, and maybe you don't. And if you think when and why and how you acted out in the world is wrapped up in logic, reason, and rationality, you're nuts. There's no freaking way. Right? Now you can do that after the fact. And I would argue that maybe you can do it before. Right. And so there's a bunch of patterns I have in my head around, how do I know when someone's done something where I might need to maim or kill them? And the only reason why I have ever had those thoughts is because when I took karate when I was young, that's what they taught me. They did not teach me how to disable people. They just didn't. They taught me how to maim and kill. And I can just tell you right away that if you trigger that, the odds that this is going to end well for you are zero. Because I'm still, even when I'm sick, I'm still pretty quick. I'm still way quicker than most people physically. I just move fast. I'm the type of guy who drops something and catches it with the same hand he dropped it with. Wow. All the time. Not that I drop things very often, but when I do, I almost always catch them before they hit the ground or anything else. I'm really quick. I'm stunningly fast. That's why in Kempo, I was allowed to fight people 2 belts up. And the guy wanted that because he's like, they're not going to be able to kick, to go after you. And all you know is punch and kick. You don't know any of the sophisticated moves, which I almost never learned, by the way. But I was just so quick, I didn't need it effectively. And so what happens is I had to go through the process of, when do you use that force? Right? Like, so you better kind of figure out like where your line is. And it's just like somebody breaks into your house. At what point do you shoot them? No one's worrying about the law. First of all, almost nobody knows the law in their state. It's just never going to happen.
Yep.
Most people have no idea what the law is in anything in their state, right?
Yeah.
And then that you're not thinking of that in the moment because you're not able to. Because, and this is Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by what's his name in Tversky? I can't remember his name. Kahneman and Tversky. And basically, that side of your brain isn't even working. The rational side of your brain isn't even on when when adrenaline's pumping. You're rational. And we know this. We've done it experimentally. We're actually aware of this fact. You
well, if you've ever had an adrenaline surge, you know that because it happened to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But like when the tiger moves in the jungle, you don't know if it's a tiger or not. You act as if it is. Like Peterson talks about this, because that's surviving, and anything else is less likely to survive. And so we have to have been doing this for a long time in order to be here, and therefore.
Well, yeah, I'll often hear people be like, "Oh, I got like an adrenaline rush off of that," and I'll be like, "Did your skin itch? Like, did it itch?" Because that's a true adrenaline dump. When you're like, when you get done and your skin, like you like, it's like the hair raising on a dog. Like, like that is like when you actually had a physical, like, or did you throw up? Did you feel nauseous like that after the fact? Because that's a true adrenaline dump. Like a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, I know, I love adrenaline. It's like, no, you don't. It's one of the most grossest feelings of the world. I was like, like while you're in it, you don't realize it, but afterwards you're exhausted. You're just like
exhausted and ill. Yep.
Yeah, you're ill.
Speaking
you're
of
ill.
exhausted.
Okay. Yep.
We are 10 minutes past our ordinary ending time here.
10 minutes.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap the stream up. Yeah. So anyway, my fellow impious atheists did not participate in the nation's festivities. Good night and God bless you all.
Good night.
Good night, brother.